would probably say that the most controversial movie of the past 5 or so years has to be Disney's live-action Snow White remake. I mean, it genuinely feels like nobody's excited about this movie. Whether you are a Disney fan, whether you are like on the left side of politics if you're super progressive, whether you're on the more conservative side of politics. It seems like this movie and its cast has managed to do something to upset literally everybody. So today I'm going to go through all of the controversies and see if the hate is justified or if all of you guys are just a little bit unhinged. I would honestly say that the first bit of controversy is just the announcement of the movie. It does feel like there's a growing disinterest in live-action remakes of Disney's classic animated musicals. I think there's been way too many of them, and I think that they've been pretty mediocre to awful. And while they found initial success because, you know, a well-known IP, people are going to go and buy tickets like lemmings, at a certain point, people are just going to go, you know what? I'm not going to watch the next one, actually. Another issue that I would posit is, does anybody really care about Snow White in 2025? I also think that one of the reasons why movies like The Lion King and Aladdin were as successful as they were because they were movies that came out in like the 90s and early 2000s. So yeah, like now that you're making live action remakes of those, well, kids that grew up watching them are excited for them. And they are also going to have families of their own that they're going to want to bring and share their nostalgia with. It's like anybody that grew up watching Snow White are in fucking hospice at best. So yeah, I think that the initial just sense of apathy that I think most people had made total sense. Like, who cares at this point about a live action Disney remake of Snow White of all properties? Where the controversy, however, really started was when they announced who would be playing the titular Snow White. Disney announced that Rachel Zegler would be playing the character, and people immediately got big mad. Because as you can see, Rachel Zegler is Hispanic. She's half Colombian, to be exact. And yeah, on this one, I'm just going to completely disagree with the people that are offended by race swaps, because I just don't care about them. As long as the race of a character doesn't play a direct role in the plot and the way that the character services the story, then go ahead and race swap. I just don't care that much. I don't think it impacts the story, and I think if you want to work with a particular actor, then go for it. I think if you just want to have a more diverse cast, go ahead. But I mean, yeah, of course, if it's a situation like To Kill a Mockingbird where the whole point of the character of Atticus Finch is that he is the only white man in his town that is willing to represent a black man. It's like, yeah, well, if you're doing a remake of To Kill a Mockingbird, you kind of gotta keep Atticus Finch white. But as far as Snow White is concerned, Snow White's whiteness never plays into the plot. It's never important at all. So, I mean, yeah, go cast Rachel Zegler if you really want to. It should also be noted that Rachel Zegler is white. She is half Polish, half Colombian. And so we're now in just like this really weird place where we're having to debate of, oh, but is she white enough? Has she been tainted too much by her Colombianness? It's just like, shut up. Who cares? I just do not identify at all with this like segment of modern audiences that are like autistically beholden to source materials, where like if you're making an adaptation of something, you have to be exactly the same as the original or else it's bad because of reasons and stuff and things. Like this whole mentality is just anti-art in my opinion. When we look at the original Snow White movie, Walt Disney took the Brothers Grimm story and changed it up, made it his own, because that's what art is. In my opinion, if a criticism amounts to this thing different from original thing, that's just silly. Like apparently in the original story, the prince and Snow White don't even really have a relationship. Apparently he doesn't see her until after she dies. He sees the bitch in a glass casket. She's dead. And he's like, I'm a necrophiliac and I want me some of that. And so Walt Disney probably saw that and went, we're going to do that differently. By the way, can I also just say that people that get mad at race swaps are a new breed of like identity politics obsessed freaks. I've been watching Smallville for the first time, and it's like so funny that Lana is race swapped. They made her Asian. Pete Ross is race swapped. They made him black. The original Daredevil movie had a black Kingpin. Hell, the 1960s Adam West Batman show had a black Catwoman. By the way, there was originally a white Catwoman. It wasn't even a thing where it was a reboot, so then they just made Catwoman black mid-series, mid-canon of the story. That's hilarious. So, like, I'm gonna be honest, I am just so sick of even entertaining these people. Like, you guys are a bunch of identity politics obsessed freaks. Most of the people that are mad about this used to not be mad, but now we're in this hyper politics obsessed world that now we care about it all of a sudden. Now all of a sudden we care about adaptations being autistically just like the original. Now, to be clear, at the end of the day, I just want artists making art earnestly, right? If it's the case that the director of Snow White originally wanted to cast a white actress, and then fucking Bob Iger comes in and he's like, hey, sorry, we got the phone call from George Soros. He enacted some new DEI policies, so your Snow White can't be white. If it's like weird executives trying to make money and they're trying to like impose that onto the art and interfering with the artist's creative vision, then yeah, that's bad. I don't disagree. And I'm sure stuff like that absolutely does happen. But I'm not going to sit here and just assume that every single race swap is done cynically, because that's entirely possible that Mark Webb, the director, just thought Rachel Zegler was the best in terms of singing and acting ability. It's entirely possible that he did just want to make a more diverse movie, or it's possible that the Disney Corporation wanted to enact whatever DEI policy. I don't know. So at the end of the day, all I can do is watch the finished product and go, that was good or that was bad. And that's all I really care about. Now, there was another popular complaint when Gal Gadot was cast as the evil queen. You know, people were basically saying, like, Gal Gadot is supposed to be jealous of Rachel Zegler's looks? What? Is that not the point of Snow White? Like, if you look at the original cartoon, the evil queen is a baddie. Like, Snow White, she's mid. Like, let's just be real. Evil queen, on the other hand, I want her to use me. I want her to abuse me. I want her to make me feel like I'm not adequate enough. Snow White is like, fine. But the evil queen in that weird condom outfit, she got me bricked up. I can't even lie. But like, I always thought that the whole point was that like the evil queen is irrationally jealous of Snow White. Like, for the mirror on the wall to even say that Snow White is the fairest of them all is like a subjective thing anyways. Alright, so the next bit of controversy comes from the actor Peter Dinklage, who himself has dwarfism. And of course, in the original Snow White story, she has a bunch of dwarf friends that she interacts with throughout the movie. And on a podcast, Peter Dinklage had this to say: literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback when they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but then you're still making that effing backward story about seven dwarves living in a cave together? What the F are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause for my soapbox? Guess I'm not loud enough. So the first thing that I took away from that is Peter Dinklage doesn't really remember Snow White very well, because the dwarves don't live in a cave. They live in a home, okay? They're honest workers. They're miners or whatever. So he just has the story wrong. And Disney actually ended up responding to it. They said this to The Hollywood Reporter: to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. We look forward to sharing more as the film heads into production after a lengthy development period. Now, I'm trying to go through the controversies in chronological order here, so we're eventually going to see what Disney ended up doing with the dwarves. But at the end of the day, do I necessarily blame Peter Dinklage for how the movie ended up turning out? Honestly, no. And I think people getting mad at him are kind of missing the forest for the trees as well. Because at the end of the day, Peter Dinklage just said something on a podcast. Again, we're going to see what Disney ended up doing with the dwarves. But Disney made the movie. They are the people that made the decision to do whatever they did. They could have just ignored Peter Dinklage. Mind you, Peter doesn't remember what the original Snow White story was like. It's entirely possible that he has a story in his mind that is actually kind of offensive to dwarves. And it's possible that if he just saw the movie again, he'd be like, oh, you know what? This is actually totally fine. I'm not going to get mad at or blame Peter Dinklage for any decision that Disney has made regarding the portrayal of the dwarves, because at the end of the day, Disney made those decisions. So up until this point, the controversies have been largely tempered, largely comparable to other controversies that we often see occurring with other movies and stuff and things. But it is at this point that things start to get a little weird.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
So a lot of people took issue with that statement there, right? People are taking that to mean that the writers are essentially saying that wishing for true love is like an inherently negative thing, and that little girls should be dreaming about becoming leaders, and that love is cringe and gay. And honestly, I do think that that's a little bit of an overreaction. Like, I can understand why you would take that from the statement. I personally kind of take that as they're just trying to write a more interesting character. Like, the original Snow White is pretty boring. And I guess this is where I'll actually jump in and say that I think that the original Snow White movie is just bad. Like, Snow White is uninteresting. Her motivations are lacking. She has very little agency in her story. Like, it's just a series of things happening to her, more or less. It's like the most agency that she really takes in the story is when she's like breaking into the dwarves' home and she starts bossing them around, telling them to do chores, and it's just like, okay, lady. I'm not even saying that a character searching for true love couldn't even be interesting. It's just that that's not even really what Snow White is about. Like, just to be clear, Snow White and the prince do not ever even have a conversation. He shows up at the beginning, he like spooks her and she runs away screaming. They don't have any interactions for the rest of the movie, and then he shows up after she's dead. I don't even know that Snow White is about true love. Like, I don't even mind Disney going like, yeah, this old movie is old. It doesn't really have much going on for it. Let's add some more stuff to Snow White's character. Like, I personally don't care about that. What I will say is that if you are Rachel Zegler, if you are the star of Snow White, what you absolutely should not do is criticize the original movie that you're making an adaptation of. Because you are obviously targeting fans of the original movie. And so, obviously they're going to get defensive if you start criticizing the original movie.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
And so here's what I'll say. She's not entirely wrong. Like, I don't know that I would call what the prince does to Snow White stalking, but it is like sexual harassment. Because, again, this guy shows up, Snow White starts screaming, she runs away. And then this guy, he says, you know what? I'm not going to take the L. I'm going to run after her, and I'm going to start singing at her. And just to be clear, I'm not saying this to, like, cancel the original Snow White movie. I don't think that Disney is trying to cancel the original Snow White movie. Like, the original Snow White movie is still available to watch on Disney+. I think it's just to say that that was a sequence that felt a little weird. And if you were to remake it in 2025, you would probably execute it differently. If I were remaking the original Snow White movie, I would absolutely flesh out their relationship more because it's non-existent in the animated movie. And I don't even think that like Walt Disney had any ill intent when he wrote that scene. I don't know, I just think sometimes things get executed in funny ways that are a little quote unquote problematic. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. But again, I will absolutely still say that if you're Rachel Zegler, you should not be criticizing the original movie when you're promoting the remake of that movie. It's just basic marketing. I feel like, not that I know anything about marketing, but that just seems basic and obvious.
No, Prince or a different kind of Prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie. Right. Andrew Burnap, great dude. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby. But it's one of those things. So true, it's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that make the journey really incredible.
That's another clip where I saw a lot of people going like, Rachel Zegler says that the prince's scenes are going to get cut. She says that there's not going to be a love story. And it's like, it's not really what she says. I think she's obviously being like tongue-in-cheek, being like, oh, gotta come watch the movie in order to find out what's actually going on. But like, I personally never watched that and went, oh my gosh, they're cutting the prince from the story. And again, I just need to reiterate this. The prince is barely in the original movie as well. Like, whenever I hear Rachel talk about it, it sounds like what they should do, which is expand on the original Snow White movie, because the original Snow White movie does not give you a lot of material to work with.
The reality is that the cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
Now, this is absolutely one of those times where I will look at Rachel Zegler and go, girl, what are you even saying? Because I don't even know what in the Snow White movie would have anything to do with women being or not being in positions of power. Like, the queen is the overarching ruler. She is the dictator, from what I understand. So, like, there is no men, patriarchy, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Pfft. Like, I genuinely don't know, like, what she's even referring to. So, yeah, I will absolutely say that this specific statement here is kind of nonsensical.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years when I was doing this film.
Now, telling that little story is fine, right? Like, it's just a silly little story about a silly little girl being scared by a silly little movie. If anybody's gonna get offended by that, I think they're really stupid. But it's like, end the story by saying, yeah, I didn't revisit it until much later, and once I watched it again, I truly was able to appreciate how innovative the animation was, how formative the movie was for the genre of animated films. Like, you need to be glazing, okay, the original movie. Like, you need to be praising the original movie and talking about how you are going to live up to what that movie was. It's just like these little marketing tactics that it really does feel like Rachel Zegler is just completely missing out on. Either way, Rachel did eventually respond to all of the backlash to those clips. She said, "I would never want to box someone in and say, if you want love, then you can't work, or if you want to work, then you can't have a family. It's not true. It's never been true. It can be very upsetting when things get taken out of context or jokes don't land," Zegler says. "The love story is very integral. A lot of people wrote that we weren't doing that storyline anymore. We were always doing that. It just wasn't what we were talking about on that day." Now, I will say one of the things that people took away from her comments is that her saying that somebody just wanting to search out for true love and not necessarily have aspirations beyond that is like a bad thing. Again, I personally don't think that it was that deep. I don't think that Rachel necessarily meant that. But it would have been nice for her to openly acknowledge that, because that was part of the backlash. And, her apologizing for her comments and all that and clarifying her stance. It's all well and good, but the reality is that at this point, people had made up their minds about this movie, and people had made up their minds about Rachel Zegler. They decided that this Snow White movie was going to be enemy number one. And listen, do I think that a lot of those people are overreacting? Yes. That being said, though, she kind of made this bed for herself. It's like, you need to be more careful about how you talk about these things, right? Like, are we in a stupid, politics-obsessed, identity politics-obsessed society? Yes, we are. And I can acknowledge that it's stupid, and I can sympathize with you from that front. But we are in that society nonetheless, and you need to be more mindful about this sort of thing. You need to try to be as non-divisive as possible. And that means not attacking the movie that you're doing a remake of, and that means not injecting unnecessary political or socio-political statements in your comments. All right, so taking a break from Rachel Zegler here, there was also a leaked set photo that showed what the dwarves of the movie would potentially look like, and well, let me just show you. Yep, this leaked set photo came out, and it essentially implied that the dwarves were not going to be in the movie, but they were going to be replaced by these random group of characters. And this lit the internet ablaze once again, because why? Seeing this set photo made people go back to that Peter Dinklage conversation and go, oh, so this is what Disney went with? They decided to just not have the dwarves in the movie? And again, this is where I come at this from. If the creatives just, for whatever reason, wanted to use these characters and didn't want to tell a story with dwarves, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I want artists to make their art, and then at the end of the day, I'll see how the art connects with me. However, if it was an executive that came in and was like, oh my gosh, Peter Dinklage said something on a podcast, get rid of the dwarves. We're not doing the dwarves anymore. We're get a bunch of diverse people. That's cringe, and that sucks. And what I will say about the Snow White movie is that I don't actually think it's really much of a conspiracy to say that there are executives making decisions about this movie because of public backlash. Because, as we're going to see later, these are not what the final product of the dwarves are. So I don't think you're crazy to think that maybe they were going to execute it in some kind of fashion. Then Peter Dinklage made his statement, and then they were like, uh-oh, I guess we shouldn't do the dwarves. Then that set photo gets leaked, and then Disney goes, uh-oh, I guess we do have to do the dwarves. And then we got what we got. But before we see the dwarves, we do have to go over some controversy surrounding Gal Gadot herself. I'm going to just preface all of this by saying that I am not a political commentator. I am not very informed on the Palestine and Israel conflict. So take all of that in mind. I'm not going to try to convince you one way or another or how you should think about it. However, we do have to go over Gal Gadot's statements on the whole situation that she gave after the October 7th attack. Later that day, Gadot posted a picture of the Star of David on a blue background with the words, "I stand with Israel." She captioned the post, "I stand with Israel, you should too. The world cannot sit on the fence when these horrific acts of terror are happening." Gadot also shared a fundraiser for people in Israel and encouraged people to donate. Whoever can and willing to donate, these people's lives changed forever yesterday. They've lost so much and need help only if you can. Link in bio. Now, people that are super pro-Palestinian have essentially made it sort of their mission to hate on Gal Gadot and, you know, call her pro-genocide and stuff like that. And listen, I don't know much about the situation, like I said before, so maybe that's accurate. Maybe that's true. What I will say, however, is that I do think that there are people that exist that probably do. Maybe it's foolish of them to think this, and you can have that opinion. But I think there are people that genuinely think that Israel should be allowed to exist, right? Like, the state of Israel exists for a reason, which is that the Jewish people were persecuted, obviously in World War II, and then they were given this land. And so Israel should be allowed to exist as a safe haven for Jewish peoples. And I'm sure that those people can also have criticisms of the government of Israel, of Netanyahu, and the way that he's engaged in this war. So I personally am not going to just look at this post by Gal Gadot, which again was right after October 7th, and just start assuming that she hates Palestinians and thinks that they should be genocided. Like, I'm just not going to fully judge her based on these posts. Because at least I don't think she has. Maybe I missed her comments. I don't think she's spoken much more about the situation beyond this. So maybe she has said some other stuff that would change my opinion. But, and again, this is coming from somebody that does not know much about the situation. I'm personally not going to sit here and say that Gal Gadot is a genocidal freak that wants to eat Palestinian babies. However, I will continue to reiterate that Gal Gadot is a god-awful actress, and based on that reason alone, should not be getting any more work.
Max Lord, you're putting yourself and everyone else in grave danger. I need you to give me the stone. What happened to it?
Don't get it. But am I going to judge her as a human being based on those posts? Personally, I'm not. All right. So with that out of the way, many controversies. I mean, this movie is truly cursed from that perspective. We now get to talk about the actual first look. Like, what is this movie actually going to be like? Because they dropped the first trailer for Snow White. All right. I mean, it honestly just kind of looks like a mediocre Disney live-action remake. I don't necessarily know that there's much to say here.
So, whistle while you work.
I cannot believe that their grand plan, their grand scheme to try to appease everybody was to make horrifying CGI dwarves that look like they fell into the uncanny valley. I genuinely don't understand what the thought process is here. Because if you are of the opinion that dwarves in the original Snow White setting is in some way offensive, if you think that them living together is somewhat offensive, if you think the original designs are somewhat offensive, if you find something about the dwarves in Snow White offensive, how is making them CGI less offensive? Them still being animated, but CGI, is not going to make it any more or less offensive. There is literally no reason why you wouldn't just hire dwarf actors for the role. I mean, I guess it could be a creative choice, like, I guess? But again, when you look at the fact that those set photos came out of what they were originally supposed to look like, I'm inclined to think that it's not really a creative decision, and it is more so an executive/PR decision. Now, as far as the rest of the trailer is concerned, I think the movie looks fine-ish. Like, it looks like the other live-action Disney remakes. It feels largely soulless. It feels largely like it doesn't recapture any magic that animation is able to capture. Rachel Zegler looks good. I think she's a great actress. She's obviously a great singer. Gal Gadot looks horrible. She's just a terrible actress. Her line delivery is just bad. And now, this might be my hottest take of the video yet, but my guess is that if they actually update the story and expand upon the original concept, I do think that the plot of this movie will probably be more interesting than the plot of the original Snow White movie, but that's just because Snow White is a movie that not much happens in it. I think that you very easily could make a better, or at least more interesting movie than the original Snow White. So you would think that after all of this, Rachel Zegler would go, damn, I should probably keep my mouth shut. I should probably not say anything else that's controversial. I should probably not unnecessarily attack people. You would think that, wouldn't you? Yeah, she made a bunch of posts when Trump got elected. And, you know, listen, it's a lot. I'm not going to read through all of it, but you can pause and read it if you really want to. There they go. I mean, the one line here that was super controversial was the end of this post here where she says, I echo Ethel Kane's statement more than anything. May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace. I mean, she essentially said, hey, MAGA people, you're all cringe. I mean, yeah, she basically just attacked half of the country in that post. Now, I'm going to be honest here. Kind of based. Listen. Okay. I don't normally try to be overtly political on this channel, but this is, of course, an overtly political topic. So all I'm going to say is that you voted for the guy that tried to do the insurrection, that tried to steal the 2020 election. You voted for the guy that's trying to deport a bunch of illegal immigrants who are here just trying to live their lives. And by the way, don't try to tell me that it's like, oh, well, they broke the law by coming here illegally. Trump broke the law when he tried to steal the 2020 election. I'm just going to reiterate that. So just to be clear, you don't care about the law. You voted for the guy whose words we can barely understand because he has Putin's cock just rammed straight down his throat, guzzling buckets upon buckets of his cum. You voted for the guy that falsely accused Haitian migrants of eating cats and dogs. Like, I remember when this happened, my brain kind of broke. I specifically remember when this all went down, and I came to the realization that MAGA people were holding Rachel Zegler, like a 21-year-old actress at the time, to a higher standard than the President of the United States. When Trump says something unhinged, they either make excuses for it, they either twist into a pretzel trying to defend it, or they just ignore it. But like Rachel Zegler says something which, hey, it's pretty dark. I'm not even gonna lie. But like this like 21-year-old actress is being held to a higher standard than Trump? Like what? Actually, and I mean this sincerely, like I don't care. Go off, girl. Go off, queen. Now listen. That's my personal opinion. My more objective opinion is going to be, Rachel, listen. Low-key based. But Rachel, listen. You can't be tweeting stuff like this out. You cannot be alienating half of the country. Like, they voted this guy in. You can't be alienating them. Like, we need them to buy tickets to this movie. We spent like $200 million on it. I can hold both of those perspectives at the same time. Now, of course, she later tweeted out an apology. Hi everyone, I would like to sincerely apologize for the election post I shared on my Instagram this week. I let my emotions get the best of me. Hatred and anger have caused us to move further and further away from peace and understanding, and I am sorry I contributed to the negative discourse. This week has been emotional for so many of us, but I firmly believe that everyone has the right to their opinion, even when it differs from my own. I am committed to contributing positively toward a better tomorrow. So, and listen, I think it's one of those things where it's like, sure, it's good that you apologize, but she has just flubbed on so many occasions now that the people that hate her are going to hate her, and there's nothing she can really do about it at this point. Like, she has truly made her own bed, which is something that I will fully admit, while also going low-key based. I guess at the end of the day, what are my final thoughts on the situation? I'm kind of annoyed by all people. I think I'm mostly annoyed at Disney for being this spineless corporation that is desperately trying to appeal to everybody and are clearly appealing to nobody with the Snow White remake. I'm honestly annoyed at a lot of the backlash. I think that a lot of modern audiences are just annoying. I think that their insistence that adaptations need to be autistically faithful to the source material is, quite frankly, just getting annoying. I wish that we could just let artists make art. And then once we see the movie, if it's good, then great, it's good. If it's bad, then it's bad. But, like, I don't think we need to micromanage them in the development process. And I definitely wish we would stop getting upset about things that we, quite frankly, would not have been getting upset about 20 years ago. I'm annoyed at, like, all of the apparent Snow White fans. If you are actually mad at the idea of there not being a love story in a remake of Snow White, bitch, there was barely a love story in the original Snow White. I don't even think you could really classify it as a love story. It's like, at best, a hookup. A necrophiliac hookup. And yeah, I'm annoyed at Rachel Zegler for just being unnecessarily divisive. She just has like zero self-awareness of what she says and how it's going to reverberate and affect the $200 million movie that she's leading. A lot of what she said, kind of based, but you shouldn't be saying it. Let wackos like me, with nothing to lose on a YouTube channel, go after MAGA people. Let political commentators go after MAGA people. You don't need to be the person that does it. You should not be criticizing the movie that you're doing a remake of. That's just so obvious to me. How is it not to you? To conclude, do I think that any of this warrants the insane backlash that people have? There are campaigns of people that are trying to attack Rachel Zegler and get her canceled and trying to make this movie fail. It's like, quite frankly, I don't even know how people have the time to be obsessed with people on the internet. Like, I don't know, I have a fucking job. So I think those people are a little unhinged. I don't think that, quite frankly, anything warrants that kind of behavior. At the end of the day, do I think it will affect the movie? Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it kind of depends on how aware of this stuff our general audience is, right? Like, are there going to be like little girls that want to watch Snow White because it's the new Disney princess movie and they obviously have no idea about any of this controversy? I think those little girls are going to exist. And unless you're like a shitty parent who's going to like force your child to participate in a retarded boycott, it's like they'll probably take them. However, has she turned away some of the childless people that maybe would have gone to see it because they feel nostalgic for Snow White? Possibly, And I do think that when you turn off segments of the movie-going audience, it's like, yeah, that probably is going to leave you unable to reach like the $1 billion mark and stuff like that. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.